My parents laughed every time I walked into the room. "The dropout is here," they whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Family gatherings were torture. Each holiday, each birthday, every wedding, I stayed quiet. I smiled. I endured. Because they didn't see me. They never had. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 29, clean-shaven, quiet, and observant. For years, I was just the family embarrassment. The one who couldn't meet expectations. The one they could mock without consequence. But that evening changed everything. It was a Sunday dinner. The house smelled of roasted chicken and stale resentment. Laughter filled the room, but it wasn't warm. It was cruel. My parents pointed at me, smiling at their guests. "Ethan, still not done with school?" The words cut like knives. I kept my composure. I ate my food quietly, took notes, observed, remembered. Then, a phone buzzed across the table. My uncle's phone. He picked it up and frowned. "Hello?" he said. Pause. Then his eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Another pause. He stood up, waving his phone. "You need to see this." Everyone crowded around. The screen showed an email. Not just any email, a legal notice. A contract. My parents froze, their faces drained of color. The room went silent. I smiled slightly. The irony was delicious. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. Years of observing, noting their mistakes, their arrogance, and their underestimation of me had led to this moment. I had quietly invested, researched, and learned. While they mocked me as a dropout, I studied business, law, and investments. I waited, I prepared, and now, with one phone call, their world trembled. The email revealed a serious breach in their corporate dealings, a deal they had assumed I wouldn't notice, a loophole only someone with patience, observation, and legal understanding could exploit. My uncle looked at them in disbelief. "You've been negligent, and this could cost millions." My father stammered. My mother's mouth went dry. The laughter that had filled the room for decades disappeared. I remained calm, clean-shaven, composed, silent, because the truth is, the one they mocked, ignored, and belittled was now the only person capable of controlling the fallout. By nightfall, the panic set in. Lawyers called. Investors questioned deals. Partners demanded explanations. My parents had treated life as a game. Money as the only measure. But they forgot one rule. Underestimate Ethan Miller, and you pay. The next morning, I sat in my room reviewing documents. Each clause, each loophole, each piece of leverage was mapped out. I didn't move rashly. I calculated. Every action had purpose. Meanwhile, my parents were scrambling. Calls unanswered. Meetings missed. Their empire was bleeding. Slowly. Quietly. And I watched. I waited. I prepared the next move. Because revenge is never loud. It's precise. It's patient. And it's inevitable. By the end of the week, the first domino fell. A key partner threatened legal action. Investors demanded a review. The family name, once untouchable, now trembled in the corporate world. My parents looked at me with panic. You did this?" they whispered. I only shook my head. "No," I said softly. "You did this yourselves." 72 hours later, the email that my uncle had shown at dinner was just the beginning. The real reckoning had yet to start. Because they had mocked the wrong dropout, I was Ethan Miller, and I was ready. By the morning, my parents were already scrambling. Calls from lawyers, investors questioning every transaction, partners demanding explanations. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't realize the extent of their oversight. I did. I had spent years observing every loophole, every clause, every weak spot. While they laughed at me as a dropout, I learned patience. I learned strategy. I learned leverage. My uncle sat beside me, reviewing the same email from the night before. "This isn't just a warning," he said. "It's a trigger for investigation. If you play this right, you could control the outcome." I nodded silently. I didn't need to speak. My calm was enough. By noon, the first calls came from the board. "Richard, we need clarification on recent transactions." "Laura, your signature appears on agreements you weren't authorized to sign." My parents panicked. They had assumed everything was under control. They had assumed I wasn't watching. I watched. I waited. In the afternoon, an internal auditor called me. "Mr. Miller," she said, "we need to verify a few items regarding the family trust and corporate agreements." I leaned back, calm. "Yes," I replied. "I'm happy to provide anything you need. Every word, every tone, measured." I didn't rush. I didn't show emotion. By evening, the cracks began to show. My father's confident demeanor faltered. My mother's attempts to charm investors failed. They were unprepared for scrutiny, and I was prepared. The following day, a major partner threatened to withdraw a multi-million-dollar deal. "Unless these discrepancies are resolved," the email read, "we will consider legal action." My parents panicked. Their empire was bleeding. I stepped in, calm, strategic, observant. I offered guidance. I proposed solutions. I knew exactly what moves to make. By the end of the week, the board demanded a meeting. My parents were called in, shaken, nervous. They looked at me, desperation in their eyes. "You orchestrated this?" my father asked. I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "You did this to yourselves." And while they panicked, I quietly started consolidating control. Not for revenge, not for anger, for ardor. Because the empire they built on arrogance and neglect needed a hand to guide it. And that hand was mine. The first domino had fallen, and I knew this was just the beginning. By the second week, the news had spread. A small finance blog caught wind of the family trust irregularities. Headline: Major family investor sparks corporate investigation. Within hours, it was everywhere. Local news picked it up. National outlets followed. Social media exploded. My parents' carefully curated image crumbled. The words "dropout" and "failure" haunted them now. My father paced his office like a caged man. You leaked this," he accused me. I remained seated, calm, clean-shaven, observant. "I didn't leak anything," I said softly. "You did it to yourselves." He didn't understand yet, but panic was starting to creep in. By afternoon, investor calls flooded the line. "Explain this immediately. Who authorized these transactions? This could impact our entire portfolio." Every unanswered call added tension. Every scrutinizing email made them sweat. They were losing control. I wasn't. By evening, Miller Holdings stock began to drop 4%, then 7%. Investors panicked. Legal teams prepared for intervention. The empire my father had built with arrogance was faltering, and he realized this wasn't just about money. It was about leverage, and I held it. The next morning, the board called an emergency session. Lawyers, auditors, and key investors gathered. My parents were summoned, visibly shaken. "Your actions have exposed the company to risk," the chairwoman said. "The board is reviewing temporary measures." My father's confident composure shattered. For the first time, he looked afraid. I walked into the office silently. No words, no threats, just presence. My calm demeanor contrasted sharply with his panic. "You wanted to control everything," I said softly. "You didn't realize that patience and observation control more than arrogance ever could." He didn't respond, because he finally understood the truth. By the afternoon, news agencies began quoting board members. "Family oversight leads to corporate vulnerability. Ethics concerns trigger investor review. Miller Holdings faces internal investigation." The stock fell 9%. Partners threatened legal action. Shareholders demanded explanations. And my father, for the first time, was powerless. That evening, I checked the hospital, where my grandmother had been admitted weeks ago. She was stable now, alive. Her life saved not by arrogance, but by careful, calculated action. Meanwhile, my father's empire began bleeding publicly. And unlike the ICU team who saved her life, no one could save his reputation now. 72 hours after the first media leak, the first domino had fully fallen. Investors began freezing assets. Partners paused ongoing deals. Lawyers drafted contingency plans. My father stared at me, voice trembling. You did this." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said calmly. "You did it to yourselves." The morning started quietly. But quiet in the Miller world is never safe. Emails flooded my father's inbox. Legal threats, shareholder complaints, regulatory audits. Every ping reminded him of his mistake. He had signed that dinner table DNR like it was a spreadsheet item. Now, consequences were real. The board called an emergency session. He couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. And this time, I was present. I didn't need a seat at the table. I only needed eyes. Because I held the key. Years of observing, learning, and preparing had led to this moment. My father entered the boardroom, pale. Lawyers shuffled papers. Investors whispered. The chairwoman spoke first. Mr. Miller, your actions have triggered ethical and financial scrutiny. We must vote on interim control measures. He stammered. I disagree. Disagreement doesn't stop procedure. Votes were cast. Pour in favor. 3 opposed. Temporary control of multiple hospital assets shifted. He turned to me, disbelief in his eyes. You orchestrated this. I shook my head. No, you did this to yourselves. He realized, too late, that power isn't just money. It's knowledge, it's leverage, it's timing. By noon, the press was relentless. Investor crisis. Miller Holdings faces ethical and financial review. Journalists dug deeper. Did a shareholder try to withhold life-saving care to save costs? The words echoed in every meeting room. Share prices fell. Investors demanded emergency audits. Legal teams drafted contingency plans. The empire my father built on arrogance was crumbling. By evening, the first domino had fully fallen. Major partners demanded divestment. Investors froze ongoing deals. Regulators scheduled compliance inspections. My father was no longer untouchable. I approached him quietly. You wanted control over life and death, I said. He stared at me pale. Do you understand now? Yes, I replied. About consequences. He swallowed hard. The realization hit him. Money alone cannot control life, legacy, or trust. Weeks passed. The board finalized restructuring. My father retained title, but influence was sharply limited. His empire still stood, but cracks ran deep. Investors and partners now treated me as a key decision-maker. I wasn't angry. I wasn't loud. I was precise. By the end of the month, my father finally said it. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was always going to happen, I replied calmly. You underestimated the quiet ones. He understood at last. The dropout they mocked was the one who saved the empire and controlled its future. By the morning, the damage was irreversible. Miller Holdings had lost 23% of its market value. Partners demanded accountability. Investors questioned every previous deal. Lawyers drafted emergency compliance plans. My father, Richard Miller, sat at his desk, pale. No advisors, no assistant, no power. I walked in calmly. He looked up, voice trembling. You orchestrated this. I shook my head. No, I said softly. You did this to yourselves. He swallowed hard. You've ruined everything. Not ruined. I corrected. Balanced. Corrected. He didn't comprehend yet, but he felt the panic. I had spent years preparing quietly, learning documents, clauses, and weak points. Every action they took to humiliate me had left them exposed. While they laughed at the dropout, I had learned leverage, patience, and strategy. Now, I held all three. By afternoon, the press and financial news went relentless. Family investor sparks, corporate investigation, shareholder decisions questioned. Miller Holdings faces ethical and financial scrutiny. The stock plummeted further. Legal teams prepared emergency measures. Investors demanded immediate restructuring. My father was powerless. For the first time in decades, he couldn't fix this. That evening, I visited my grandmother after her recovery. She smiled weakly. You did what was right, she whispered. I nodded. No one else saw it coming, but she did. My sister Rachel arrived at the estate. She looked anxious. You handled all this quietly? She asked. Yes, I said calmly. Quiet. Precise. Permanent. Weeks passed. The board finalized restructuring. My father retained the title, but influence? severely limited. The empire he built on arrogance and neglect was under my control, and I had done it without shouting, without anger, without spectacle. One night, my father finally admitted the truth. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was always going to happen. I said softly, "You underestimated the quiet ones." By the end of the year, my grandmother fully recovered. The family empire stabilized under ethical oversight. My sister learned humility. My father learned the cost of arrogance. And me? I became indispensable, the one everyone had to rely on. Not by force, not by anger, but by patience, calculation, and precision. I am Ethan Miller, clean-shaven, calm, observant. The dropout they mocked became the one who controlled it all.